Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another session of Exploration Tech. As always, my name is Jared Heckler. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Brilliance, and excited to be connecting with all of you once again. I'm going to let Lori McDonald introduce herself.
Yes, I'm really excited for today's session. What is our last session of the year, and a really great one. A little bit of background on me. I started Brilliance a little more than 20 years ago. My background's in computer electrical engineering. I worked as a flight controller at NASA, ended up meeting my husband there and relocating to Milwaukee, Wisconsin through a job promotion he had with Rockwell Automation. And that was in 1998. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And I decided to start a web development company. And so 20 plus years later, he left his job at Rockwell 9 years ago, and now he leads our development team. And we've grown quite a bit as an organization. We actually made the Inc. 5000 list this year. And really all focused on implementing digital commerce solutions for manufacturers and distributors. And as a part of that journey, we're always thinking about how do we help our customers improve how how they create experiences for their customers. And of course, we're also thinking about how we do a better job of listening to our customers and really creating great solutions. And as a part of that, I have been excited to connect with Serene and learn more about the work that she does and how that can help all of us. And so, Serene, I'd love to let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am Serene Mireles from Collab, and we help our customers solve problems by helping them be more customer-centric and using approaches like design thinking to accomplish that. So we specialize in running different kinds of workshops to really help teams make sure that they're solving for the right problems and understand their customers and bringing that customer centricity to their organization to help them achieve better outcomes.
I love that. As we're always trying to solve problems, it's good to know that you're out there. So I'm excited to dive into this topic.
So Serene, tell us, when did you first start working with design thinking?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge fan of IDEO, and I like to kind of think of them as the godfathers of design thinking and innovation. And I think I first heard of IDEO through the book Creative Confidence by Tom and David Kelly, who are some of the founders of IDEO. And I was blown away by the book, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. But it's all about how we're born with creativity. We're born creative, and if you look at children, they don't have any limits. It's everything is open. But somewhere along the way, you kind of tend to lose that ability. You might be in school and you're discouraged, or even in the workplace, you might get discouraged. And really having that creative mindset allows us to look at problems differently and stretch our thinking and look at it from different perspectives and kind of get over that fear of being wrong. If you look at things from a creative perspective, it really allows you to come out to better solutions and analyze things in a different way. So, it's really important to have that mindset, and it's like a muscle that you need to practice. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. IDEO, they have different courses in design thinking. So I earned their advanced design thinking certificate, which was also amazing and really stretches you and challenges you to look at things differently. And after taking those courses, I kind of wanted to figure out how could I apply this to my own work? And what would be a scalable way of doing that? And my co-founder, Irina Becker, and we've both worked in design and tech for over 20 years and working in all different industries, from publishing to different agencies, different large enterprises. And working in all of these organizations of all types, you kind of start to see the same problems over and over again. And so when we started Collab, we wanted to figure out a way to bring customer centricity and help teams better align and bring in that design thinking framework and mindset to really kind of solve for some of those problems.
My background is technical and engineering, and there can be times when I think of creativity as something that's artsy. When I hear you, I am reminded of what I already know, but sometimes I forget that creativity really is about innovation, thinking outside the box and problem solving. And that's something that all of us have, right? To your point, whether we're technical or nerdy, or all of us have that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Serene, can you tell us more about the primary problem where people go from idea to solution?
Yeah, so that, again, as I mentioned, when I said that working in all these different industries, you start to see the same problems over and over again. And that is one of the big problems that we have seen over and over again, is that companies and teams, they do go right from idea to solution, and really skipping a critical step of having a strategy and making sure that you're solving for the right problem. So that's a huge one. You see it all the time where teams will launch a new feature, or maybe a startup, starts a new business, and they say what 90% of startups fail, and a lot of times it's because they're solving for the wrong problem. And so, it's really important to take a step back and validate, is this really a good idea? And there's a lot of ways you can do that through testing. And it's the same thing with teams when a stakeholder has what they think is a really great idea, and they ask you to build this new feature or this new product. And so it's important to just test those ideas and validate. How can we take this idea and spend the least amount of time and spend the least amount of resources and money to test this and make sure and validate this is actually a good idea? Because otherwise you're going to spend 6 months to a year building this product or building this feature that no one is using. And that's a lot of time and resources that are spent building that, only to find out people aren't using it, or at least they're not using it the way that's intended.
I can think of many instances, somewhat embarrassingly, right, where we have headed down a path. We have an idea, like this must be a great idea. It seems so clear to us, and we head down that path, and it doesn't seem to bear out the way we had anticipated. And so, like, I know, like, this is true to me, what you're saying, and yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it all the time, and teams, they have a release date to hit. So they're trying to hit their release dates. They're trying to make sure that they have their backlog filled. And, it's really important, because when you're trying to move so fast, you kind of lose sight of what you're really trying to do. And so, by being human-centered and prioritizing based on those customer needs and those human-centered needs, you can align your team and prioritize what's really important.
In my experience, when we introduce a new process, there's always a little bit of pushback and challenge there. What would you say are some objections to the process?
Yeah, so we see that a lot too, and especially in large organizations where it's hard to change that culture. It's hard to get buy-in for change. And so what we find, and what we always recommend, is to start small. So, what are some small changes we can do, and right now, to be more customer centric? And then as you start to implement these small changes, you start to see the impact of that, and it leads you to better outcomes. You have this continuous learning process that we like to do, and that starts with doing a research kickoff. So in this research kickoff workshop that we run, we're going to release a new product or a new feature. So what questions do we have about this, and what assumptions are we making? Because when you have an idea, you are making some assumptions that, you're assuming that this is something your customers want, or you're assuming that this is solving one of their problems. So you look at what those are, and then you rate it on 2 different scales. So you look at what are we the most certain or least certain about, and then you also look at it from the risk. What is the lowest risk to the highest risk? And when you think about the risk, you think of it in terms of what's at stake if we're wrong about this idea. Is this something that your entire business is being built on, or is this something that you're going to be spending a month building, and all of the time and resources and money involved in that? So when you go through this exercise, then you can see, okay, these questions or these assumptions, these are our highest risk, most uncertain questions and assumptions. So here's where we need to do more research, and here's where we really need to dive in, because there's a lot at stake here, and these are things that we just don't know enough about. And then you can build tests. So after you've identified those things, you come out of it with a research plan, and then you can see these are some things that we need to do to test this. And again, it's about spending the least amount of time and money on these tests to validate that, or at least give you some more confidence. So, nothing's going to be 100%, but at least if you can test and validate, you can see, okay, we've answered these questions. This gives us more confidence that this is a good idea and we can push forward. Or maybe you start to do some research, and there's many, many different methods you can use to do these tests and research. It could be doing customer interviews. It could be running surveys. It could be just a really quick cost analysis. So, it's not just about like testing prototypes. There's a lot of different research methods you can do that will give you confidence. Or you might realize you have more questions and you need to do more research. So that's why we say it's really a continuous learning process, and it's really about observing and learning, and then going back and seeing, oh, what else do we need to do here?
I love the focus on continuous learning. It aligns with what we know in terms of like digital commerce. Anything that we're doing in terms of when we're creating something for end customers, it's always a process of like testing and measuring and trying out new things. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, when you talk about your research and like doing customer interviews, I would think there's a potential risk of customers being biased in the feedback that they give you. And I'm curious, like, how are ways that we can invite better feedback from customers that helps to maybe minimize what bias they might have in the feedback they give us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we tend to do, and what we help teach our customers to do too, is use research methods that are based on best practices. So let's say you're going to do a customer interview. We'll give tips on how to do that, or a toolkit for how to do that. And when we conduct interviews, we're very careful to not be biased. And that's something that's important too when you're testing a hypothesis. You're not just looking to validate your hypothesis, but sometimes you're looking to invalidate it. So when we're interviewing customers, we make sure that we're asking for their candid, honest feedback, because that's how you learn, and that's how you can make improvements too. So maybe you're testing something that you've already released because maybe you find out people are not using it. So you want to get that honest feedback from your customers to see, how can we improve this? How can we make this better? So when you're getting that feedback from customers, you're asking open-ended questions, and you're not leading them to the answer. And also asking them things like, tell me about a time when you tried to do this thing, whatever it is. So like asking them to tell you about a time, or tell you a story, or give you examples, or sometimes even having them just share their screen if you're in a remote setting and say, hey, show me how you would do this. Or there's usability testing methods where you just give them a task and you just observe what they're doing. So a lot of it is just about observing and asking open-ended questions, and then also it's important to create that kind of rapport with the customers to make sure that they feel comfortable to give you that open, honest feedback. And something else too, a lot of people like to do like focus groups. We tend to avoid that situation, because when you do have a group of people together, it could lead to some bias, because groupthink starts to take over. One person says something and then everyone tends to agree. So we like to do one-on-one style interviews with customers when we're doing interviews.
I think that's so interesting. There's a book called Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath, and one of the things it talks about is how dangerous confirmation bias can be in businesses in terms of decisions that they're making, and how we often look for information that confirms what we already thought to be true. And so just really great strategies you're suggesting in terms of how we learn to operate in a way that would help us to be open and invite feedback, to your point, that could invalidate our idea as much as validate it. And really what a gift that is, in a sense, because we don't want to spend tens or hundreds of $1,000s on a plan that isn't going to pan out. So, or won't pan out the way we hoped. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we do talk to customers, we always tell them, like, please be open and honest and candid, because I think it was like Bill Gates said, you learn the most from your unhappiest customers. And it's really true. That's how you can figure out what are the areas for improvement, where are those opportunities. And when you hear directly from customers, what their challenges are, what their pain points are, that's how you can improve. And that's how you also can identify areas for innovation. If you talk to 20 customers and they're all saying the same thing, they all have these same pain points, those are your areas of opportunity where you can make some really great improvements and possibly innovate and change things.
How do people realize they need some design thinking? They want to leverage this approach. Like, what prompts someone to say, I want to do this?
Yeah, so we've seen a few different areas where you might want to adopt this approach. And one being, like, let's say your business wants to develop a new strategy or a pivot and launch a new product or this new strategy. So for example, when COVID hit, a lot of businesses have been forced to really change their strategy or change their whole business model because of that. So that is a really great opportunity to make sure that you are being customer centric and that you are helping solve for those real human-centered problems. Another area where you might want to really look at being more human-centric and customer focused is where you do launch a product or service, or maybe you start a new business and you realize that customers are not using your product or service or this new feature that you just launched. That's really important. I mean, it's always important to start from the very beginning and be customer centric, but where a lot of companies and teams realize it is when they're failing or they're just seeing things not working the way that they had anticipated.
Sure.
I'd imagine there's a lot of that going on right now. Specific to this situation then, as you're working with these clients, are you guys doing that work or are your clients doing that?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of both. We run these custom workshops, and when we do that, teams kind of start to learn this new collaborative way of working. With the design thinking exercises that we do a lot of thinking on your own. So we'll do an exercise where maybe we're ideating or brainstorming ideas, and in silence, it's called working together alone. So we'll give everyone a prompt to brainstorm things that are not working right now. And we'll give everyone 5 minutes to come up with all of their different ideas and one idea per post-it note, let's say. And then once the time is up, you kind of can group and cluster those ideas or similar ideas, and then you vote on them. So it really helps to teach teams this new way of working where you are working together, but everyone has a voice and everyone's voice is heard. Because a lot of times, if you're in a brainstorming session, the loudest voice in the room is heard, or the highest paid person, the CEO or whoever that may be, the person with the biggest title in the room is the one that's voice is heard. But when you're trying to innovate and you're trying to be more customer centric, it's really important to have diverse perspectives and make sure that you are thinking about things from all different angles and bringing in those different perspectives. And so these different ways of working help teams to faster align on things and really prioritize and align on what's really important. So if you are all focused on the needs of your customer and being customer centric, it really democratizes the way that you're working, and it takes some of the ego out of it and some of the the politics. Especially if you're working in a large organization, they tend to be very segmented or siloed, and oftentimes each silo has their own agenda or kind of their own thing that they're pushing for. But instead of debating, if you can align on what's really important, what are these true priorities for our customers, then it really kind of takes some of that debate out of it, takes some of that ego out of it. And instead of, the company saying we need to be engineering led or we need to be product led, it changes that narrative. And we're customer led, we're customer focused. So if things are not aligning to this goal, then we're not going to do it. It's not a priority. So it really helps to prioritize and align the team.
One of our values at Brilliance is building trust through healthy conflict. For me, that's important is that I think it helps us to hear from everyone. But the reality is that's much easier said than done. And so to your point, like having actual an approach that facilitates that happening, that's really fabulous. So do you have stories of specific business benefits that your clients have seen or you've seen organizations have through working through this?
Yeah, we run, a lot of these different kinds of workshops. And again, it really helps show teams a new way of working. Think about, how many times have you been in a meeting where people are just debating about what you're building or, what you're going to do next. And a lot of times people just talk in circles and the meeting ends up with scheduling another meeting or without any real action plan or without any resolution. So when we run these workshops, helps really align the teams, and then you come out of it with an action plan. And you can accomplish so much in just a short amount of time. So, we see this again and again where normally, a team, they might be meeting multiple times to try to get some resolution on something. And by running a workshop, you can just within a few hours, we've had customers come back to us and say, wow, you have helped us accomplish more in just a couple days than we have in 6 months. Because, when companies hire people, you hire all of these brilliant, amazing people, but people don't always, know how to actually collaborate and work together. So by doing these different kinds of workshops and by aligning on the needs of the customer, that also really shows them like, okay, these are ways that we can collaborate and make sure that everyone does have a voice and you're bringing in those different perspectives. So yeah, that's like one area where we've really gotten great feedback from customers and really showing people how you can create these repeatable processes and it's actionable and it's scalable.
So as an organization that takes process incredibly serious here at Brilliance, I'm really intrigued after learning more about your organization in the workshops. Can you share about your process and what that entails?
Yeah, so we use a lot of design thinking methods. So a lot of the methodology is based on really understanding and really understanding your customers. So it starts out with having that empathy. And there's really 3 lenses to design thinking. So it's really about what's desirable. So, what do your customers want? What are their challenges and pain points and where are some areas for opportunity? And what do the customers need and want? And then you have to balance it with what's technically feasible, what can you actually create and build? And then what's viable from the business perspective. So, is this something that you can monetize, is this something that you can build a business off of? So it's really about the balance, but you have to start with what's desirable, because if this is something that customers don't want, then it doesn't matter if it's feasible or, if it's even viable, because if your customers aren't going to use it, then none of it really matters. So, it's really starts out with that, and then having that empathy for your customers. So again, going back to like observing them and understanding what their needs are and their pain points and frustrations, and then defining like what are these problems. So, so many businesses, they spend more time like in the solutioning space and building solutions, but it's really important to take a step back and make sure you really truly understand like what you're solving for. So once you have that piece of it, it's really important to spend a lot of time in that kind of understanding and defining phase. And then from there, once you have that understanding, then you can ideate and solution things. And then it's important once you're in that solutioning phase to prototype or test things. So again, there's a lot of different methods you can use for testing, but it's really that continuous kind of loop or continuous learning process of observing and making and testing and then learning. So it's really, it doesn't end there. So you might launch your product, but it doesn't mean that you're then done. So it's important once you launch even, you can look at your analytics, look at at the customer behavior and talk to customers.
So I can imagine someone's listening to you and thinking this all sounds great, but like, how do I actually get started?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I would say don't do what I did when I first started. So, after going through IDEO and taking their different courses in design thinking, and I also read the Design Sprint book by Jake Knapp and John Zaratsky. And I don't know if you're familiar with the design sprint process, but it takes some of the design thinking framework, and it's like a 5-day process for basically solving a problem. So it could be any problem from a service to some kind of a new product or website or app or anything really. So after reading that book, I got really excited. And after learning about design thinking, at the time I worked for a software company, and I thought, we need to start doing this because we weren't customer focused. And so I put together a PowerPoint deck, and I thought, I'm gonna, pitch this to everybody, and we're gonna get everyone on board with this. And I did, and it fell flat, because if you're trying to pitch a new way of working, it's hard to get buy-in, and it's not something that you can just pitch a PowerPoint and people are going to adopt it. So it's really about starting small and identifying what are some opportunities where we can make some improvements. So what's not working well, and where are we not very customer focused, or what are the outcomes we're seeing? Because maybe you're seeing that why do we keep releasing these new features and nobody's using it? So, it's about identifying those opportunities and then starting small. So what are some things we could do? You could do the research kickoff and start to identify, what are some small tests that we can do to try to be more customer centric. Or it could even be as simple as, every time we're in a meeting, we just end up debating. So instead of debating, let's test things. Let's look at data, make sure you're making these evidence-based decisions. And something else too, if you are finding that maybe you're debating on what you even should do. So do these note and vote kind of exercises where let's all brainstorm, and it could be anything. It could be even just related to your team. Like maybe, your team wants to start to implement a new way of collaborating or working together. So have everyone brainstorm, their ideas in silence, one idea per Post-it note, and then you vote on them. And it really kind of helps to see where the team is aligned on things. So it could be just really small things like that, where you just start to do these small exercises, or run a retrospective exercise where, again, you're kind of doing these working together alone kind of note and vote type exercises where you're getting everyone's input and everyone feels like they can contribute and they have a voice. And, a lot of it also has to do with just like that kind of psychological safety of feeling like, I can contribute and my voice matters, and all working together. And once you start to implement these small things, people then start to see the power of these new ways of working and collaborating and being customer centric, because you start to see the outcomes.
It's really interesting. We're gonna have to engage Serene to come and help out my sales and marketing team here.
I think everybody can use this, so yeah.
Very cool. So as an organization, and specifically our leadership team, we've been continuously thinking through how we can support diversity in our workplace, and I think that's been even more spotlighted this year with everything that's happened. How does your process support equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts, Serene?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And really, I think it's all tied together because, as you are designing products and services, it's important to be representative of the people that you're designing and building for. And so it's important when you are building a team to make sure you are being inclusive and you're not just like a homogenous group, because when you have a homogenous group of people, a lot of times they do tend to kind of think the same. So it's important to have that diversity and make sure that your team is representing different voices and you're being inclusive. And again, with having different kind of ways of working and collaborating, it really does teach you how to be inclusive and how to bring in multiple viewpoints and perspectives. So that's kind of another principle of design thinking, is having these kind of cross-functional and multidisciplinary teams. So bringing in people from different areas of your business. So maybe you're going to run a workshop, you'll want to bring in, somebody from engineering and somebody from design and somebody from marketing, and then your stakeholders too, and the business owners. So it's important to on your teams, make sure you're bringing in diverse perspectives and having that representation. And again, part of it too is that psychological safety and feeling like you're in a safe space and you can be open and candid and give radical feedback, and feeling like you can bring your whole self to work and really be who you are. So all of that, it's all really tied together and it's all related. that's how you solve problems. You can't just all have the same way of thinking. Especially now, the challenges and problems are so complex that you need diverse perspectives and you need to think about things from all different viewpoints.
Definitely. Yeah, as an employer, I think about both. We work towards greater gender and racial diversity and equity within our organization. And it's not just a matter of finding people that will, be interested in joining our team, but also about creating a culture that ensures they feel heard and included. And to your point, the design thinking approach really creates an environment that facilitates voices being heard, which is so important. And to your point, helps us build better solutions.
Excellent. Any final notes either of you would like to add?
Yeah, I guess I would just say a lot of it too is that mindset shift. So, really embracing things with a beginner's mindset and being curious and, asking questions. So especially once you start talking to customers, it's important. You've probably heard of like the 5 whys, but it's important to ask why. Or even if a stakeholder or somebody comes to you with, hey, we want to build this new feature, it's important to ask why. Why are we doing this? What problem are we solving? Who are we doing this for? Why is this important? So really getting to that root cause of the problem that you're solving for. And really, those problems, those are your opportunities. Those are the areas that you can really start to innovate and solve problems, which will lead to better outcomes. And I guess the other thing too is it's important to step out of your comfort zone. It's okay to be wrong. That's why running these tests and being more experimental, that's how you learn. And again, that continuous learning. So experimenting and being okay with failure. And I don't want to necessarily say failure just because it's wrong, it doesn't mean you failed, but making sure that you're learning from it and then iterating. So it's really that iterative process.
So Serene, if someone in the audience is interested in connecting with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, so the best way is either LinkedIn or our website. It's mbcollab.com.
I just want to say I'm so thankful that you agreed to join us today. I've learned so much from you, and I look forward to continuing to learn from you. So thank you, Serene. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you all. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Serene, for taking time out of your busy day to join us. This was wonderful. As Serene mentioned, if you're interested in connecting with her, you can visit the mbcollab.com website or connect with her on LinkedIn. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all a very happy holiday season here, and we'll see you in a few weeks.